Hello and welcome to our latest episode of Loops. For those who are not familiar with it, Loops is a live webinar series committed to spotlighting innovation in the field of circular economy and sustainability. Today is a special episode. We're not only speaking about urban logistics. This episode will be the last episode of the season as well. I'm Maximilian, the host of today. Let us speak about urban logistics. You might ask yourself, why does urban logistics matter? First of all, it should be said that urban logistics today is responsible for between 30 to 50% of main air pollutants, which means that urban logistics is one major player when it comes to clean air in our cities. Not just the quality of air is a part of urban logistics, it's a broad topic which focuses on emissions, noise pollution, safety, and traffic as well. Currently, around 73% of Europeans live in urban areas. It is estimated that by 2050, that number will rise up to 85%. Considering that the majority of freight is delivered within an 80-kilometer radius and that the current trend is to shop online rather than locally, this will further increase the road space occupied by urban logistics. Uh, by making urban logistics more sustainable and circular, around 73% of all wheel-to-wheel CO2 emissions could be reduced, which will make a huge difference in the long term, thus making it a topic which needs to be addressed. Today's guests are Dr. Susan Wrighton of City Changers Cargo Bike and Beres Silbach, founder and CEO of ONOMOTION. I would like to point out to the audience that it's at any given moment possible to ask questions in the comments down below. Beres, could you tell us more about you and what ONOMOTION is all about?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Maximilian, for the introduction. I'm gonna share my screen, prepared some slides. My name is Beres. I'm co-founder and co-CEO of ONOMOTION. I founded ONOMOTION with two other founders, and I also have a co-CEO. Philip and Murat are the other co-founders. And we are from the automotive and electric mobility area. And we are on a mission to slow down climate change, so save CO2 emissions, and also to improve the quality of life in cities. Because as we just hear that more than 70% in Europe of all people are already living in cities, and our vision is a city without pollution, without noise pollution, but also without air pollution, without major accidents, where all people are happy to live in and where they enjoy a very high quality of life. The current urban challenges we see in cities is that we have an increasing demand and supply of city logistics, but 99% of the vehicles which are used are not only trucks, but most of the time also diesel-powered trucks. Of course, you can now start to replace these diesel trucks by electric trucks, but you then still have a lot of place which is taken for us people living in the city. And there are actually not really enough batteries and also not enough electric charging infrastructure to run all these trucks electric. So that's why we started 5 years ago to develop another solution, which is not depending on big, heavy vehicles. If you look into the future, then these problems which you just saw on the last slide will even increase. Why? Because e-commerce is constantly growing. During Corona, we saw a growth of 20 to 30% from year to year. And this will go back now to a growth to around 6% per year. But still 6% every year means that in 7 to 8 years, you have double the amount of parcels. And additional to parcels, you have also e-grocery companies, you have fashion companies who start direct deliveries, and many new type of businesses. So we developed a future solution, which is basically based on an electric cargo bike. The special thing about the electric cargo bike is that you actually can swap the containers. And by being able to swap the containers, we will containerize first and last mile logistics. And if you now think back into the 60s and you realize how the containerization of the world trade actually enabled globalization and made shipping much more efficient, then you can imagine how the containerization of city logistics will help to make it more efficient. And because of this increase in efficiency, you also make it more sustainable. So we have these electric cargo bikes who do the very last mile. And then you have trains, trucks, electric trucks, which do the middle mile. And the idea is that outside of the cities, you have depots where you put the stuff into these containers, and then you bring the containers into the city, you store them in the city hub, and then from that city hub, you do the very last mile with small electric vehicles. And by doing so, you can replace the trucks on the last mile. You need less space. You don't park in second line anymore. You can park at the side of the street or in front of the house directly. And you actually can deliver more stuff per person an hour than before. And this is why companies like UPS, like DPD, like Hermes choose our solution. And by being able to have a standardized container, you can also make it easier to transport stuff inside the city, because everybody knows how much a container inside the city costs, and everybody can have an idea of what you can put inside this container. And by being able to know how to transport stuff better and more efficient and cheaper in the city, you can also enable circular economy in a much better way. For example, tools or other things which you maybe only need once or twice a year, you can now easily share with other people in the city and can easier rent it to other people. Like I explained, you already have the trucks for the middle mile, you have the standardized containers, you have the cargo bikes, and you have the micro depots. The micro depots can be, for example, a bigger shipping container, which is placed in the city. Or today we also see many parking lots, which are not that much used anymore because few people are going inside to the city by car and do their shopping there. They more go into online shopping. And so you can also use parking lots for micro depots. So what do we have achieved the last 5 years? We developed a container, and we developed that container together with companies from the parcel delivery industry. The container has 2 cubic meter of volume. It is 80 centimeters of width. It's the same width like a Euro pallet, so you can put 3 of these containers next to each other. And we decided for this size, so you have an efficient way for the very last mile, because 2 cubic meters is enough in terms of volume. And because of the 80 centimeter width, you can also transport 3 containers next to each other in one bigger truck for the middle mile. We developed a vehicle. So we really started with a white paper and had a new type of electric cargo bike with weather protection, with a very nice design, with an electric parking brake, with electric locks, so that you really can make this process very efficient. 80 times a day, a delivery guy needs to get out and in the vehicle, needs to open the doors. So it's very important that this vehicle is developed around the delivery person so that everything really works very efficient. We work with Apcoa together. Apcoa is Europe's biggest parking lot operator, and we already successfully in several cities in Germany use parking lots as city hubs. For example, in the center of Berlin, in the Mall of Berlin, there's a micro hub where a company brings the laundry, and then the very last mile is done by our cargo bikes. And you can imagine these kind of city hubs, that it's an area in the parking lot which is separated from the normal parking, and there you can park the cargo bikes overnight and you can store the containers. So this is actually very efficient, and you can roll out this all over Europe. There doesn't need to be any more investment in additional infrastructure. You can just use the infrastructure which is already there. This is very important in our point of view. The next step for us is to design the vehicle with the principles of the circular design. So most of the time, we don't sell the vehicle to our customers, we rent it out. And by choosing that business model, it's in our own interest to build this vehicle as long-lasting as possible. Every part of that vehicle can be changed, so we do not need to take the vehicle out of the process. We just need to change parts which are not good anymore, like the engine, like the wheels, like the brakes, like the frame. Everything can be replaced at that vehicle. And besides the vehicle, for us, it's also very important to have the container in a circular design, so that all the materials which are used in the container can be actually reused again, either for the same purpose or for other purpose. We also have our own service and maintenance team. This is also very important for us. We regularly check all the vehicles which we rent out to our customers, usually once or twice a month, depending on how many kilometers they are using. And by having these close maintenance checks, we guarantee that these vehicles last very long. And then the next step for us is to also have our own operations team. So in some cases, we also do the deliveries ourselves. Our customers can book it, and we actually do the first and last mile logistics for them. We are sure that first and last mile sustainable logistics in the city is an enabler for other circular business ideas, like I described before, renting tools or other stuff. We also work with grocery companies who ship groceries from outside to the city into the city. This is an increasing trend that people not only want to eat biological, but they want to eat locally. So they don't want to have fruits or vegetables which are shipped around the world. They want to eat the fruits and vegetables which are grown around the city. So this is basically then a field for city logistics. You can have a depot outside of the city where you bring the orders together, and then you use the containers to bring the orders into the city, and then from the micro depot you do the last mile. So we are very happy that we can be part of that story, and we are very sure that in the future we will have much more greener cities, we will have less pollution, and that our vehicle will play an important role in that story. Thank you very much. My name is Bear Silbach again. If you have any questions, we can directly after the pitch speak, or we can also send me an email at silbach@onomotion.com. Thank you.
Thank you for your inspiring presentation. I have a question. I mean, the idea with the containers is pretty interesting, and it reminded me first of the containers used in aviation. So is there a way which you build in to either chill the containers down or heat them up in order to the goods sometimes need to be chilled for medical use or so whatsoever. Are you taking that into account?
Yeah, I mean, we have already an insulated container, and now with a customer, we also work on an active cooled container. So then you have an own battery inside the container, which uses energy to actually cool down the container on a certain level. Yes, this is a project we have with the customer. Until now, most of our customers are in the parcel delivery industry. For them, active cooling is not that important because you also don't have that usually in your bigger vehicles, but we also have now customers who are demanding for an active cooling system, and for them we are developing that solution.
Great, thank you. Moving on for, yeah.
Can I also ask a question to Beres, or is that not the right time?
Sure.
Beres, I was wondering, maybe I didn't hear it correctly. Do you lease most of the vehicles out to your customers? Yeah.
That's correct. We rent them out, and we call that a full service renting. So it's a renting contract, including maintenance and service and also insurance. And most of our customers want that.
Yeah,
They don't want to own a cargo bike. They just want to have a solution. Yeah, and that's why we are interested in making these vehicles very long lasting, and also like to integrate parts of it again in our value chain.
Yeah. Great. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you. So, Dr. Susanne Reuten, would you like to tell us more about the City Changer cargo bike?
Yes, good afternoon. Hello. Yes, I can't share my screen. I didn't manage that. So Maximilian, you're kind enough to share my screen. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about the City Changer cargo bike project. It's a Horizon 2020 project. And before I start talking a little bit more about the project, next slide, please. Yeah, this is actually the reason basically why my colleagues and I started to do these kind of cargo bike projects already in 2010. Actually, this is our third last large European project on cargo bikes. Next slide, please. Because we really believe that we shouldn't accept that our cities are basically given over to cars. That we are losing valuable space and that we are basically polluting our cities. And we know that cargo bikes are climate friendly. The last 10 or 12 years have definitely proven that. They are saving our space in the cities, but they are obviously also a healthy transport option, but they're doing something else actually. Next slide, please. They are also making our cities much more safer. So you have this situation often in Europe, or at least in Austria. Somebody is killed, a biker by a van, and then everybody starts to talk about technological solutions in these large lorries. But next slide, please. Cargo bikes really here also the solution because they don't have a blind spot. So for all these reasons, we really started with these projects, as I said, already in 2010. Next slide, please. And here I just listed a few of the benefits and the potentials really of cargo bikes. So I've already mentioned they're obviously saving emissions, they are healthy, and they are improving lives in general, but also there's an incredible potential to shift these trips. And also already in our first project, we realized that, and that's, I think, a very conservative calculation actually, that more than half of the trips, the transport trips in cities, and these are private and commercial trips, could be shifted from cars and vans to these bicycles. So let's have a look at the next slide, which shows us the situation in Copenhagen, where basically every fourth family with more kids has a cargo bike. And this shows us a little bit the potential. Even in Copenhagen, there's a potential up, but in the rest of Europe, which is quite incredible. So we do think, next slide, please, that cargo bikes should really be considered as the new SUVs for livable cities, but also, as Beres has shown us, not only in the private sector, there is an enormous potential in the commercial sector. So let me start with the few points about the project. Next slide, please. As I said, this is a Horizon 2020 project that has started in 2018 in September and has been extended twice. Also partly because of the pandemic, obviously. And the aim was basically to improve the quality of life in our cities, or to show how this is possible by using a whole catalog of measures and activities that have in previous projects been shown to be really effective, or the most effective, to promote the use of cargo bikes. So next slide, please. we have an enormous amount of city partners. Actually, we had 15 city partners, and we have several other partners that are large associations like the European Cyclists Federation, the ECLF, and Copenhagenize, and so other partners that help us to move this project forward. So what's really maybe noteworthy at this point is to have a look at the enormous geographical distance or distribution of these partners across Europe. And it's quite amazing. And you have to keep in mind that obviously Varna in Bulgaria has started from a very different point than, for instance, Oslo and Gdynia, other than Lisbon, etc., in this project. Nevertheless, there were fantastic results in really basically all of the cities. So let's have a look at the next slide, where I will, these are the measures, or a selection of the measures that I want to show you today that we have been working on. In principle, almost every city has implemented over 10 different measures and activities. But today I just show you a selection of the most important ones, I guess. So these are subsidies, obviously, and tax incentive. Those are cargo bike sharing and rental and tryout schemes. And the last section is regulations and infrastructure. So let's jump right to the next slide. I would like to start with subsidies and funding. And obviously, subsidies and funding, as you can imagine, if you really give people the money into the hand, this is a very effective way of promoting cargo bike use. And also, particularly if you want to have a quick startup funding to raise awareness within a city and to show what a cargo bike is, that's very, very effective. And next slide, please. I think this ties in nicely with what Beres has already said today. So obviously, cargo bike subsidies, bicycle subsidies, so much better than subsidies, wasting subsidy money on cars, because they are just much more cost effective, faster to implement. We don't need all this elaborate charging infrastructure, etc. So if a city or a country wants to implement something, electric funding, let it be bicycle or cargo bike funding. Next slide, please. So our cities did that. All these cities implemented actually subsidy schemes. So you can see even Varna and Gdynia in Poland did so very successfully. Gdynia was actually the first city in Poland at all to have such a subsidy scheme. But subsidy schemes in Germany, in Austria are currently booming. We have over 80 at the moment. And next slide, please. I just go through some of these subsidy schemes because I think they're very different and it's quite interesting to have a look at them. So Cambridge County Council managed to secure a fund from a cargo bike grant fund in the UK. That was a countrywide fund of, at the moment, it's probably around £4 million for municipalities, and they got 30 such bikes and they put them to very different use. So 4 of them went to a company, Sedify. I'm sure Beres knows them. They are a very successful cargo bike courier company in the UK. Some of the bikes were integrated in a residential sharing scheme, so to introduce young families particularly to these bikes. Others were introduced in a leasing scheme that for commercial purposes or for families, where people could try out their bicycles before they bought them. That's something very important. We will come into that a little bit later. Yeah, and the rest is integrated generally in a within the city, and they can be rented on an hourly basis. Next slide, please. In Mechelen, the municipality went a different way. They had a subsidy scheme, particularly for entrepreneurs. And I think this is quite important because we see cargo bike use booming in last and first mile delivery already, as you can see from these enormous developments that Beres showed us today. And obviously also a lot of private people now have cargo bikes, but in this area of service, the service industry, the take-up is still too slow, I think, and a lot can be done there. Next slide, please. In Lisbon, they also had a funding scheme, and that was quite interesting actually because they coupled it with a tryout scheme where the people could try out bikes for a longer period of time. And one of the people who tried it was a vice mayor. So he liked it so much, he then made sure that there was a bicycle and cargo bike funding scheme available in Lisbon. So a real success story. And next slide, please. If you're interested to have a look at all the tax incentives and purchase premiums available in Europe at the moment, have a look at the ECF, the European Cyclogistics Federation's website. They are also one of our project partners, and they've done a great job pulling everything together. So it's not only subsidy schemes for cargo bikes, but for bikes in general. And you can kind of have a tool there where you can have a look for different subsidies, which type of bicycle, etc. So really important tool here. Next slide, please. So the next area that we have experienced that is very, very important in the take-up of cargo bikes are sharing, rental and tryout schemes. And I think it echoes what Beres has told us already today. So next slide, please. We had around almost 600 cargo bike tryouts in these partner cities. And a tryout obviously can last from you ride around on a bike for half an hour or 10 minutes to, borrowing this bike for a few days. But I think it's really, really important because people who haven't ridden on a cargo bike, they have no idea what to expect and they can't imagine the potential of it. So it's really, really important to have these tryouts in various forms. Next slide, please. So from these tryout schemes, obviously rental and sharing schemes equally important. Obviously in European cities particularly, there is not the space is limited and it's also not so easy to find safe parking. So that's also something that is still lacking for cargo bikes. And also, let's be honest, cargo bikes are not cheap. So having these sharing and rental schemes, as we've seen from Beres, is really important, and I think is one of the major ways forward in our cities in the future for the cargo bike use. Next slide, please. Yeah, obviously. So as you can imagine, something that legislation is also an incredibly powerful tool to promote cargo bike use. A really good example, for instance, is Sedify. I've mentioned them before. This is this cargo bike courier company in the UK. They have started with just 2 bikes 10, 15 years ago. And now they have over 100 bikes and they have 11 locations in the UK. They want to expand to, I think, 30 or something more. And they have told us that they wouldn't be as successful, or they are only successful really in cities that have access restrictions for motorized traffic. So next slide, please. Access restrictions, obviously, being one of the most important things. So either restricting the access time-wise or low emission zones, etc. What whatever way you do it, that's really a message to city municipalities. That is one major way you can promote cargo bikes. And another quite funnily more difficult thing is procurement rules. It's quite curious how difficult it seems to be for municipalities to change procurement rules, meaning that companies that use cargo bikes or deliver by cargo bike are also included when it comes to tenders, and maybe not only included, but even preferred when it comes to getting a tender for something. So another important thing that cities can do. And next slide, please. Providing infrastructure is also very important. Obviously, cargo bikes are wider, and unless a city really decides to have a 30 kilometers per hour limit on all streets, we need wide enough bicycle path, and obviously we also need cargo bike infrastructure for parking. So this is shown on the next slide. This is a selection of the cities in our projects that have tackled the problem with cargo bike parking, but also thought about establishing extended infrastructure like in Varna. And another really great example is the city of Prague, where the city administration has cleared an entire parking space for cars to provide a consolidation center for 8 cargo bike courier companies or companies that use cargo bike for deliveries. Yeah. The next slide, please. We also have a university as a partner, even so this is an innovation action and not a research and innovation action. But the University of Technology in Krakow have collected data from 7 of our cities, where they have looked at, depending on the topography and the depending on the type of potential clients, like restaurants, cafes, bars, hotels, apartments, shopping centers, etc., within a particular area, how much savings of CO2 and other emissions could be achieved when you use cargo bikes. And I think it was around 60%. So if you're interested, we will have their publications also on our website. So please do visit our website. So exactly, thank you. On the next slide, we have other brochures and guidebooks that we have created, anything from 20 good reasons why you should use a cargo bike to how you can make it permanent within your city. So this is the website, cyclelogistics.eu. And on the next slide, you can see our latest and 9th brochure. It's basically a recommendations guidebook for different stakeholders, everybody from EU officials to the wider public. And it also includes a guide on a cargo bike ecosystem. And we've heard about this from Beres today. With cars, you know, it's obviously self-evident that everything from insurance to after-sales, maintenance, financing models, security, digital integration, second-hand market is already available. But all these are things that are still missing or just in the first steps, let me say, when it comes to cargo bikes. And that's what we need to really achieve the full potential. So on the last slide, I just like to tell you we had an enormous outreach. There are a lot of webinars on our website and nice videos. We had lots of articles, not to mention some in the New York Times and BBC. And we have just recently completed our 3rd industry survey, which has surprised us as well with the enormous potential really of cargo bikes. So for the first time, we also had a look at how many people we are currently employing in the cargo bike industry, and how much revenue that is bringing. And yeah, it's about 2.5 billion euros at the moment, and 170,000 people employed. That's already, and with a growth rate of about 60% each year, you can imagine that this is really, yeah, a sector for the future. Thank you very much. So yeah, happy to answer questions, or you can also write me.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question. You mentioned blind spots. Do you think cargo bikes should have as well mirrors to see what's going on behind, or because
Yeah.
we have some accidents of people not turning their heads around?
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I think even me myself, I'm already thinking maybe in the future I'll get a mirror on my own bike. And then obviously on a normal cargo bike, on these Christianias, is probably less necessary than when you have bicycles that basically look like ONOMOTION's, really futuristic and next generation bikes. So obviously they have mirrors, as far as I know, but Beres will be able to tell you that.
Okay.
Yeah, we have mirrors, and I think that totally makes sense. I have
Yeah.
also a question, Susanne. What is, in your point, more important? To improve the infrastructure for the cargo bikes, or to have subsidy programs, or to actually take into the account the real cost of cars and trucks and make them pay for it?
Well, to be honest, my answer has to be everything hand in hand. You know, I think we definitely need a different infrastructure, because if we have a look at cities like in the Netherlands, where they have already so many bikes that they have a little bit of a problem with cargo bikes, it's definitely useful to think about the infrastructure. I personally think that once we have fewer cars on our roads and have speed limits, then all these large cargo bikes can also use road infrastructure, and then they wouldn't clog up that. But yes, we still don't have exact data about comparing vans to cars. We have started that, but all these things really should go hand in hand. And subsidy programs, as I said, for instance, I've informed the city of Vienna of a subsidy scheme in 2017. And what they wanted was a quick startup funding to get cargo bikes on the streets of Vienna, so that people would see them. And we all know what happens then. People stop and start talking. And so for that, it's useful, obviously. And also for the large cargo bikes, funding definitely makes sense.
Okay, I have a general question. I mean, it's nice to implement cargo bikes and bring down CO2 emissions and so on, but isn't there still the elephant in the room, climate change? And with that, higher temperatures do mean that more ozone gets created, or that the roads are getting hotter. So how do we cope with that in terms of humans who drive the bicycles? I mean, they can't drive it if it's too hot. They just will, you know, it's just...
I think it's important, Maximilian, to understand that we always speak about electric cargo bikes, or like most of the time. I mean, the bigger cargo bikes we are also producing, you actually by 100% see them electric assisted. And electric assisted means that it's not exhausting at all. And then you have the wind from driving that cargo bikes. You have often the weather protection also from direct sun. So actually it's not a problem to use that even like 40 degrees or plus. I used our cargo bikes in Berlin with 40 degrees plus, and it was not exhausting for me because I don't really have to pedal that strong. I just have to pedal a little bit, and I get assisted by the electric motor, then batteries, and I have the protection from direct sun, and I have the air coming in. So I think normal cargo bikes without electric assisted are definitely not an easy thing to use in the summer. But in the B2B area, you, I think by 99% see only electric assisted bikes.
Yeah. From my side, I can only say that also from our survey, we know that now probably 90% of the bikes that are sold are electric assist, also for the private sector. So there's a definite change there. Second, I would underline everything that Beres has said, obviously. And then, I mean, what should we wait for? Think that, okay, we shouldn't move forward with cargo bikes because maybe in 20 years it will be too hot to ride them. We need to take action now so that it won't be too hot in 20 years.
You're right.
I can answer the question in the chat. Somebody asked from Colombia, nice that you listened to us, that if these cargo bikes are protected against the rain. And for us, ONOMOTION, I can say, yes, we have a weather protection. You are protected from the top, from the side, and from underneath. It's not completely closed because we don't want to build, again, a car. So it's open on the right side and on the left side. So you can fast access and get in and out of the vehicle, but you are protected from rain. And the big advantage you have compared to a truck. With a truck, you have to look for some place to park it, and then you walk the last 10, 20, 50 meters to your final destination. With a cargo bike, when it's rainy, you use the cargo bike, you are protected from the rain. Then you would park directly in front of the building, and you only need like 2-3 steps and you're inside the building. So you're actually less confronted with the bad weather than compared with a truck.
Yeah, should I also answer that? I'm sorry, I can't see the chat, but I think, yeah, it's definitely more important for the commercial sector to be protected and to have a cargo, and a lot of these cargo bikes, these big cargo bikes now have weather protection. I've just been to Eurobike 2022, and yeah, most of them have it. And for private reasons, I mean, it's the same as for biking. I think it always is a matter of what you wear. I mean, there are cities in Finland that you know, have snow for half of the year, and still a lot of people cycle more than people in Nicosia, for instance. So it's always a matter of yeah, how you protect yourself.
Yeah. I read an article in the New York Times the other day. It was about your project and well, the city, the CCCB project. It's quite a hard name to say it out loud, isn't it? So anyway, so there it was stated that in Latin America there are some pilot projects for cargo bikes as well. Is your project, since it's ending like in the end of this week, is it still involved in the pilots or trying which are going to happen in Latin America or not?
No, we are not involved in Latin America. And actually, it's a shame that after 12 years now, there will be no European funding. But yeah, we are doing steps to sort of have some long-term effect afterwards.
Okay, thank you. And what about the supply chain situation in the biking industry? I heard like 2 years ago that there were hardly any bikes to buy. Is it better now? And how is the situation with producing cargo bikes and buying them?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably Beres is better to answer that, but yes, the situation has been difficult, and that's why I think we only saw a growth rate of around 50%. We would have seen an even bigger growth rate if the supply chain wouldn't have been so problematic, but as far as I know, it's improving. But yeah, I hand over to somebody
Yeah,
who
I
knows.
can confirm that. I mean, in general, the supply chain was very challenging the last 2.5 years. First because of Corona, and now because of the war in Ukraine. And we see lately a little bit of improving of the situation, and we hope that this continues the next couple of months. So we have now full control of the supply chain, and we are also constantly producing bicycles. And I think this is for the whole industry. But what we see is a price increase, especially on electronic components. So one thing is to secure the supply chain. The other thing is to try to keep the price at the same level, or of course also try to reduce the prices. But this is in the moment difficult. So it's getting better that you secure the supply chain, but prices are increasing.
They're still increasing. It's
Yeah,
insane.
still increasing. Yeah.
Okay. So just a general question once again. When it comes to certification, is there any needed certification for cargo bikes in terms because there are vehicles on the street, or is it quite different than automobiles and cars in general?
Should I go? So we have established within this project also together with European Cycle Logistics Federation and Cycling Industries Europe expert group. And there is one part of an expert group that is working on standardization. So this is obviously very important, and the cycle logistics community is involved in this. This is one side. And then the other, and Beres maybe can say more to that. And the other thing is, which I also think is very important, ECLF, so Cycle Logistics Federation, is currently working together with Safe LMD to develop a cargo bike rider training, a certified cargo bike rider training, because obviously we see large players coming into this arena now. I mean, we have seen DHL and DPT and UPS over the last years already sort of trying out cargo bikes a little bit, but now Amazon is also entering into this arena. And you can imagine when you have fleets of hundreds of people, it's really important to have certified training people there that know what they're doing. We're working on that.
Okay. That's great. So speaking of like Amazon and so on, I mean, more and more people, especially during the pandemic, tended to buy online. So in some scenarios, it's estimated that by 2030, there will be an increase of 78% in last mile delivery. Do you think that it's feasible to handle with cargo bikes, or if cargo bikes are up to the task in terms of bike drivers and like the supply chain for the cargo bikes in terms of delivery?
I believe the only way you can handle that increase is by containerization and cargo bikes. Because if you just double the size of the number of trucks, you have completely traffic jams in the city all over the place, and you cannot just handle anymore. So I think most of the city logistic companies realize that they cannot grow anymore because they stuck in the traffic they are causing themselves. And the only way is to make it smarter, to make it intelligent, and this is by containerization and smaller last mile vehicles. And these are in the moment cargo bikes, and I think this is how you can actually handle that increase in last mile logistics.
Thank you.
Yeah, and to handle that, I mean, I agree with all that. But to handle that, obviously, we need changes in the cities, and municipalities need to support. So there need to be consolidation centers near the inner city or near the people who get the deliveries, because obviously cargo bikes only make sense the shorter the distance they have to ride. So there is a lot of we need a lot of courageous politicians, I'd say.
Yeah, and like Barry said, we need to like create space to use all parking lots for the delivery chain instead.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving us your insight and your time, obviously. If you don't have anything to add, I think it's a good time to wrap up the episode. And thank you for being here. And yeah, the next Loops episode will be in September, as far as I know. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
thank
Susanne, and
you.
thank you, Maximilian. Have a nice day.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
And
Thank
sorry
you.
for the confusion in the beginning.
No
Bye.
worries. We solved it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good one.